This chapter covers how to use text and fonts for the screen. We'll explore creating different types of links and inserting text from other programs. Let's get started. Before we can get started, we need to define our chapter. So in our Files view, we're going to choose Manage Sites. I'm going to click on New. This is going to be Chapter 4. And now I need to navigate to that particular chapter. On my desktop and my project files, we're going to click once on Chapter 4, and if you're on a PC, you can also right-click and choose Select. We're going to click on Choose, and now we're going to click on Save. And now done. The first file I'd like you to take a look at is fonts.html in your Chapter 4 folder, which again is our root folder. So when we choose fonts for the web, we want to choose fonts that are found on both platforms, on both a Mac and a PC. There are several, but not as many as you'd probably think there are. So we have serif, sans serif, monospace, and italic, and a few webdings and wingdings. So for the serif fonts, we can choose Times, Times New Roman, Georgia, Palatino, and MS Serif. And for the sans serif, we have Arial, Helvetica, Impact, Lucida Sans, which is also a PC font. We have Lucida Grand on the Mac, Tahoma, Trebuchet, Verdana. Geneva is also a Mac font. MS Sans Serif as well. There are also a few monospace, Lucida Console, which is Monaco on the Mac, and also Courier New. There are a few webdings and wingdings, of course. And mentioning fonts for the web wouldn't be complete if I didn't mention Comic Sans. Of course, there are other ways to get the fonts that we want inside of our websites. The @FontFace rule was proposed in CSS2 and has been implemented in IE since version 5. Amazing, huh? You can find out more about @FontFace at a list apart. Now we'll take a look at how we can change those fonts inside of Dreamweaver. Instead of going to our CSS, because we haven't gotten to that chapter yet, I'm going to choose my page properties. And in our category for our page font, for where we see our default font, if I click on here and edit my font list, I get a dialog box that pops up that shows me all of the fonts that are my default fonts inside of Dreamweaver. But I can always choose something different. So for instance, maybe I don't like how this is particularly set up, Verdana and Geneva and just a sans serif. Maybe I'd actually like to see that as Verdana, Helvetica, then Arial, and then sans serif. Now you may be asking yourself why we choose that. So what I want is probably Verdana. Now, Verdana is also the most legible font on the web. The characters are a little bit wider than in most fonts, so it's more legible on screen. Serif is the least legible on screen. Just keep that in mind. So I'm going to make my own version of this. So I'm going to keep Verdana in there, but maybe I'm just going to get rid of my sans serif and Geneva for a moment, because I can't change the order in which that was in to begin with. So I'm going to choose from my available fonts. I either can scroll along my list, or if I know what I want, I can just type it in. So I'll choose Helvetica, and then Arial, and then I know where my sans serif is at the very bottom, and I will add that. So now, instead of just Verdana, Geneva, and a sans serif, I would prefer that they have Verdana. But if they don't have Verdana, I'll take Helvetica. If they don't have Helvetica, I would like Arial. And if they don't have any of those, I'll take any sans serif font. And that's how we can change our font list inside of Dreamweaver CS5. I will click OK, and we'll cancel out of that. Let's go ahead and close up this file before we can get our next one. So now that we understand our naming conventions, our folder structures, and adding meta tags to pages, we need to take a look at adding text to the pages as well and working with text inside of Dreamweaver. Double-click on About.html. In the About page, there's just a tiny little bit of text, so we want to be able to add some more. Click your cursor after the end of the first paragraph and hit Return. If you have Word, then I want you to navigate to your Chapter 4 folder into Project Files folder and open extratext.doc. Now you might notice that I'm opening this up in TextEdit, which is my text editor on a Mac. Now you could open it up in Word or Notepad, whichever text editing software that you have, but note that Word is the one where our paste special feature was made for, because Word ends up adding extra characters, sometimes special characters, and that's what we want to get rid of when we paste special. You'll notice that this particular file also has bolding and italicizing as well as paragraph returns. I'm going to select all and I'm going to copy it. So Control-C or Command-C, depending on whether you're on a Mac or a PC. When I come back to Dreamweaver, instead of just pasting, I'm going to use Paste Special so I can make sure that I'm getting the right formatting for the text that I have selected. I'm going to go ahead and right-click and choose Paste Special. My only options from getting this from the document that I grabbed it from is text only, text with structure, paragraph, list, and tables. If you actually opened up this particular file with Word, you would also see your other options for text with structure, bold, or text with full structure. I can either choose to retain my line breaks or not. Go ahead and choose it now so that we can see what that is like. Click OK. So we see, because I've got my line breaks in, and depending on where I grab this text from to begin with, because we've turned on our invisibles for our line breaks, I can actually see them in my file, which is very handy at this point. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to click on my line break and actually click on Return so that I can see an actual paragraph instead of one entire paragraph that just happened to have a few line breaks in it. And by the way, my line break is just a shift return inside of Dreamweaver if I would like to create one. Now that I've gotten rid of all my line breaks, I need to style my text. So I put my cursor inside of that very first subhead, and in my property inspector, I'm going to choose heading 2. So I see this is already styled. So that we can take a look at what that style entails, go ahead and click on your CSS panel over on the right hand side. I'm going to go ahead and double click my insert panel to close it up so I can have just a little bit more room. I see that I have a style for H2. So depending on how you have your panels set up, I just want to make sure that we're all seeing this the exact same way. So I have a category view down at the bottom left-hand corner. I also have a list view, but I have selected just show only the properties that go along with that particular rule. Okay, so now I see that I have a border bottom. It's dashed and it has a color set to it. The color of the font itself, the size, my line height, my margins, and some padding on the bottom for that particular style. You'll notice on the right hand side on the underneath I have a trash can, so if I would like to trash that particular style I can get rid of it. If I would like to edit the rule, I can click on the little pencil. If I want to add a new CSS rule, I can click on this button and I can link a new style sheet at this point. So go ahead and click on your edit rule or double click the H2 inside of the panel itself. I'll just click the pencil. So in my type category, if I wanted to change this a little bit, if I thought that the font was a little too large, I could change this to 1.3 em. I'm also going to change my line height to 1.8 em. Now that's going to give me some extra spacing in between my lines in my paragraph. I've got my color set here. So let's say we want to change the color to something else. So we can see what it looks like if we change our style sheet. On border, I've got a dashed line. Let's change that to dotted and see what that looks like. And we'll change one more thing and make it a little more obvious. And I'll click OK. So now I see that it's red. I've got a blue dotted line instead of a dashed line. And the size has changed just a little bit. Now, unfortunately, this is going to change that style everywhere. And I may or may not want to do that. So we've copied and pasted a file inside of Dreamweaver, but what if I have an Excel file that I need to place as well? So let's go to our Files panel, and I would like you to open both join end and join start.html. In our end file, we'll see what we're actually going to produce. So I have some past winners, and I've got a table in here with some tabular data. The thing about tabular data is it can always be sorted inside of Dreamweaver as well. But let's go to the start file. I'm going to scroll down just a little bit. Right above my last paragraph, I'm going to put my cursor and hit the return key. I'm going to go to my File menu, Import, and Tabular Data. So I'm going to browse for that tabular data, and I happen to have a TXT file inside of our Chapter 4 folder. So Adobe Software Winners.txt. It opens up this dialog box that lets me make sure that I have a tab delimiter. I could do comma, semicolon, or other. Do I want my table width to fit the data, or do I want to set it to either a percentage or a pixel size? And we're going to just set that to 500 pixels wide. I'm going to say 0 for the padding, 2 for my spacing, and let's set that to a 0 border as well. The top row I'm going to format to bold, and we're going to click OK. So I'll scroll down a little bit so I can actually see it. And now I have a file that has all of my tabular data in it without me having to copy and paste that from some other location. This is a great way of bringing in tabular data and a good place to talk about whether to use tables or divs for layout. This is tabular data, so this is a good reason to use an actual table. We'll be explaining more about tables in another chapter. So even though we're going to talk about tables in another chapter, there's a few things that we can do with this table right here without manipulating it too much. If I click my cursor inside of that table, I see my tag selector at the bottom of that window. Go ahead and click on the table tag and select the entire table. So far, we've only had text selected when we've taken a look at our property inspector, and this is what your property inspector is going to look like when we have a table selected. Notice in the left-hand corner of my property inspector is really a blank space to give the table a name. This is going to be the ID for this table so that I can make changes to this table specifically and not all tables through CSS. So I'm going to call it Winners. Now if you take a look at your tag inspector, you'll notice that you have a pound sign and Winners after it. With my table selected, I can also go to my Commands menu and Sort Table. So I can sort by column, order, ascending, descending, and then I can sort other columns as well. So let's say that we want to sort our column on the left-hand side, and we'll say that we want it to be alphabetical. Instead of it being by the year, we'll do it alphabetically. Do I want to sort including the first row, sort the headers, footers, etc.? We're just going to click Apply. And now all of the first names are in alphabetical order in the left-hand column. This is a great feature inside of Dreamweaver in working with tables Maybe it wasn't sorted before you brought the table in. I'll click OK, and we'll move on to named anchors next. So we have some files we'd like to open up. In Chapter 4 folder, I would like you to open meetingsend.html and meetingsstart.html. If we look at our end file and actually look at this in the browser, when I click on November 2009, it should take me down to the bottom of the page where I have the information for 2009, and I have some links that will take me back up to the top. December 2009, it'll take me down to that spot. I can go back up again. Our February is only going to go down to that point. So notice that it's far enough up on my page that it's only going to show February 2010. I can see all the rest of my page as well if I need to scroll. Let's close this out and actually make our named anchors. Go ahead and click on meetings_start. So in this page, we have our headers, we have our navigation on the side, but you'll notice it just has a little pound sign next to it, so it's not actually going anywhere. The pound sign is strictly so that I could style those links over in my sidebar. So to start with our named anchors, we need to see our insert panel. I'll fold up my CSS styles for the moment and make it so that I can see my insert panel a little bit easier, and it's just in the common category of my insert panel. I'm going to place my cursor right before the M in my March 2010, and I'm going to go ahead and click on my named anchor. A little dialog box pops up that allows me to put my anchor name in here. Now there's a few things that we need to remember in putting an anchor name in. First off, I don't want to use a number to start it off with, and I never want to use a capital. Just all lowercase. Don't feel like you need to put the whole entire line in as well. Whatever is going to be unique on the page. That's all that really matters with your named anchors, is that it's a unique name for each one. I don't have any other Marches, so I'm just going to choose MAR for March and click OK. So now we'll scroll down to the next bit of text. So February, I will click on named anchor, FEB, click OK. We'll do the same thing for the rest of our text here. January, named anchor. December. And lastly, November. And OK. So now I need to make sure that I have a named anchor at the very top of my page. To do that, it's very easy to do so with my tag selector, because sometimes we have a full page here. It may be hard to select something outside of a container. So I'm going to choose my container tag. Once my container is selected, I can hit my left arrow, and now I will be outside of my container. I clicked on named anchor, and I'm just going to call it top. And now I should see the little invisible symbol at the very top of my page, pushing it down a little bit. And again, it's just an invisible symbol, just visually for me inside of Dreamweaver to understand that I have an anchor at the very top of my page. So now we need to actually link our files to our named anchors. And there's two ways to do this. So I'm going to select my November 2009. If I scroll down to where I see my named anchor, my first option is being able just to click inside of my link panel where the pound sign is. I know that I happen to have named that NOV, so I can just type NOV, hit my enter or return key. It will jump back up to that portion of the page, and now I have that actually as a link. We're going to go ahead and do this for the rest of them. So I'll highlight December and make sure that I'm looking at the right thing and type in DEC. I'll highlight January, and you can either point and shoot to that particular anchor, or you can type it in yourself. And for February and for March. Once I have those in, now I can actually put my back to top in. So I'll scroll down to the very bottom of my page and hit a return and type back to top. I'll highlight it, and in my link panel, I'm going to do a # and TOP because that's what we named our anchor. And now I can copy and paste that after each section. Now you can test your file, and it should work exactly like it did in meetings_end. There's just a few other type of links that we need to understand working with text inside of Dreamweaver. If we scroll down to the bottom of our page, we'll see a footer. In that footer, we have some links that go along with the pages that we have inside of our files. If I click inside of those don't have any links at the moment. So if I double click, I can select a single word. I'm going to close up my insert panel so we can see our files view a little better. So this is going to link to my join HTML file. If I grab my target, I can point and shoot to that particular file. Since we've been using an end and a start, I'm going to make sure and point this to our end file. Now that I've pointed to that particular file, that is now a link. The great thing about using your target and pointing to that particular file is the ability to have Dreamweaver understand the path to that particular link. If we were up a folder, instead of it being in the same root directory, there would be a // telling me that I'm up and out of this particular folder into another folder. Because I pointed instead of just typing, I know that I'm getting the correct pathing because Dreamweaver is doing the work for me. So we'll go ahead and create these other links, and I will point and shoot to those particular files. And finally, I'm going to point and shoot to my index file. Now you'll notice that my home and my index file are not named exactly the same thing. It's all about my server. I need that index.html or index.htm file so that my server knows what file to go find first when I open up my website. Now that we have our links in, go ahead and hit your return key. So now we're going to create two other links that we use all the time inside of Dreamweaver. The first is an absolute link. So I would like you to type www.totaltraining.com. And we're going to also type a space. I'm going to hold down my shift key and click on my / to create a pipe, another space, and we're going to type an email address in here. So it's going to be guest1@totaltraining.com. So the first one is an absolute link. So far we've created relative links because they're relative to the document that we have open at the time. My absolute link, however, needs to have the absolute URL in the link field. So if I actually type http://www.totaltraining.com, hit my enter or return key, I can also give this a title and a target. So my title could just be as simple as Total Training. And my target was typically used once upon a time when we did frames on a regular basis. Now we don't use frames all that often anymore, but we still use this to choose _blank, which allows us to open our link in a brand new browser window. Now I'm going to highlight my guest 1 at totaltraining.com. I have two choices here, depending on how comfortable I am with writing code or not. If I am comfortable with writing code, I can just type mail to : and put my Total Training email address in there. I'll go ahead and copy that, just in case I would like to do that. Or I can go underneath my insert panel. If I open that back up again, I also see an email link. Since I've highlighted it and copied it, it's gone ahead and put the text in there and my email address in there. I click OK. And now I see that it's actually put in my link field, mail to, instead of me having to type it myself. So we've done relative links, we've done absolute links, we've done an email link, and we've done named anchors. In this lesson, we're going to take a look at working with lists, ordered, unordered, and definition lists. Over in your Files panel in your Chapter 4 folder, find lists.html. So in this file, we have a few different types of lists. So what benefits are there for members? What does it take to become a member? And some definitions. So I will scroll here so I can see that first set. As I take a look at the items that I have listed here that I want to become an unordered list, I notice that there is a paragraph return after each one. And how I know that is that I see a format down here in my property inspector. I see my P tag over in my tag selector. So when you're making a list, make sure that you just put your enter or return key after each list item before we can make it an actual list. So I will highlight those first things here. And in my property inspector, I'm going to click this little button right here that is my unordered list. And now those items are my unordered list. Now in HTML, there's one other thing that we can do here. Remember with CSS, I can style this however the heck that I would like. If one of these items is selected, so it doesn't matter whether it's the first or the last of my items here, I'm going to go ahead and click on List Item in my property inspector. And I can choose what type of list this is going to be. Is it going to be a bulleted list? Is it going to be a numbered list? Is it going to be a directory or a menu list? And in my style, I can say whether it's going to be a bullet or a square. Now my start count, my new style, all of this is grayed out because this is an unordered list and those are my only choices. If I click OK, now I have a little square instead of a bullet. So if I scroll down just a little bit more, I see that I've got another list here. Now this list we're going to make into an ordered list. So if I click the next button over in my property inspector, I see that I have numbers now. Now this works exactly the same way, meaning that if I put my cursor in either the top one or the bottom one, I can get to my list items. And in this case, I've got a style. So how do I want these? Do I want it to be a number? Or do I want it to be a Roman numeral? Is it steps? Is it maybe just an alphabet small? And I can say where it's going to start at. So if I have this here and then maybe later on I want to continue the same sort of listing but not in the same space, then I can start my count a little bit later on. So I'm going to just change that to alphabet small and click OK. And now I have A, B, C, D as my what does it take to become a member. The last kind of list we're going to take a look at is our definitions list. This is really very simple. So I'm going to highlight both of my little areas here, so the definition and the explanation for that definition. Now you'll notice that in my property inspector, I don't have anything for this. So I'm going to go up to my insert menu, my HTML, my text objects, and this is my definition list. And it's going to give me my definition and the term. All of these things can also be styled with CSS, and we'll take a look at that later.